TV umpire to director, we have a player review. Can we rock and roll, please?
Hello and welcome to Bits and Pieces, the friendliest cricket podcast. The podcast that leaves its audience quizzical, wondering if this is a real cricket podcast or just fantasy, because we never let facts get in the way of a good laugh. A podcast that has been described as the under 17 boys' locker room for its maturity, and a podcast that works like a volleyball team. There are always too many people in one box. It's hard to follow the action unless you're super invested, and it takes about three people to land one decent punch. This is episode 146, and I am Tony. Of course, who else did you expect in a week where Sanju Samson notched up yet another T20I century? And joining me, a very, very special guest, a man who has covered the circuit of quizzing, cricket, and all kinds of international sports. It's Srinath Ripat. Fun fact about Srinath: when Switzerland runs out of Kautina Neuer, they send a bad signal to Srinath, who speaks into a mic for 5 minutes, from which they extract enough hot chocolate for a year. Say hi, Srinath.
What a Easter egg, bro. Hi everyone. Nice to be back.
Also, actually, with me, even more special guest, as you can see on screen, a man who can't be contained in one medium because he's bursting with creativity and original ideas in multiple formats. And as if that weren't enough, his silver fox looks will lay you down flat. Say hi, Prashant DP.
Dang. Okay. Hi, Tony. Pleasure to be here.
And rounding up the panel today, in case you haven't figured it out already, a man we've all admired from afar and needs no introduction. If you're going through a midlife crisis like I am, it's probably best to ask yourself the question, what would Joy Bhattacharjya do? A man with a spine and a wicked sense of humor who brings delight to everything he does. It's a pleasure to have you on Bits and Pieces. Say hi, Joy.
Hi. Good to be here. Really good to be here.
So since you're new to the podcast, Joy, let me give you some context of how we operate. See, in that last line that I mentioned, no, I said who brings delight to everything he does instead of joy. Right? This is the kind of podcast that is clever enough to avoid a joy-based pun, because by now you're tired of hearing it. And we are also the kind of podcast that points out how clever and subtle we are by explicitly calling it out. We are basically the R. Ashwin of podcasts. I like to call Bits and Pieces the first draft beer of history, because we usually record right after the most consequential cricket match of the week in varied states of post-match inebriation. But today is a little different. It's going to be laid back. We're not going to talk about one specific cricket match, but because we have the opportunity of having you, why don't we start with a quiz question? Okay, so this is Nitin Sundar's chemistry mnemonic from school. Amongst all of the chemistry equation, Nitin has basically sort of written out a mnemonic which is very strange. It goes Dravid, Kirsten, G. Flower, A. Islam, Guy Whittle, Jack Cullis, Andy Flower, Glenn McGrath, Nanty Hayward, Shane Warne, and Travis Friend. This is from around 2001 or 2002 when Nitin was in 11th or 12th. Joy, the question is, can you figure out what mnemonic this is?
What is?
It's actually a googly, it's not a mnemonic. He's basically in between studying hard for 12th standard.
Yeah, organic chemistry. This is clearly serious organic chemistry. And
yeah.
What is he trying to do?
This is from 2001 or 2002. If
those who are just listening in, he's also meticulously put 5 dots next to Dravid, Kirsten, Grant Flower, Callis, and Andy Flower.
And I'd also like to point out that here also Sanju Samson doesn't get selected.
Yeah, but considering Sanju Samson was about 5 years old at the time, perhaps it's a bit unfair to call him out on this one. All the selectors.
So, Joy, this was in between all of the serious organic chemistry Nitin was doing. He is creating his first super selector squad, right? And
Jesus Christ.
Okay, yeah. So basically, somewhere between creating super selector squads and eating selectors for supper, we all grew up. So that is basically the spread of what we want to cover here. You've always been a constant presence, right from super selector to ESPN school quiz to KKR and beyond, right? So we'll get into a little bit of everything if that's okay. But we start with Super Selector, Prashant.
My question was, how did you come up with the idea? Because it was very much a sort of 0 to 1 kind of idea. I mean, no such product existed. It wasn't an optimization of something that already existed or an improvement on something that already existed. It was the first of its kind. So how did that idea formulate and how did you sell it?
The idea of doing something fantasy based actually didn't come from me. There was an ESPN Star Sports conference, and in those days, what had happened was that 10 Sports was a new kid around town, and they had rights to a lot of matches in Sharjah, which wasn't the best thing on earth because we never won in Sharjah. But consequentially, and Neo Sports used to own the rights to Indian cricket. So most of the rest of the cricket was an ESPN Star. But our big challenge was that how do you actually create interest around non-India cricket? So how do you actually make non-India cricket interesting? So as a result of that, these guys said that this England had just started some fantasy level football games. So they came back and they said, is there anything can be done with fantasy? So we sat there and we looked at the English model. And the English model in those days was very simple. You picked 11 players, you could pick as many. It was for an entire tournament. And here we suddenly discovered we had a totally different challenge. There were two challenges. The first part of it was their test matches, their ODI matches, and in a month, everyone plays different numbers of games. So you cannot actually turn around and say that they're playing the same number of games around. The second challenge was the fact that given these circumstances, we needed to also, because we are finally a television channel, we needed to make a television show around. So the first part of the challenge, I sat and I had some other guys who, were fellow nerds and boffins, and we devised a formula where we said, it was a combination of how much the player can score in terms of opportunity to score, what is his current track record, and what is the kind of runs he scored, say, at home, away. And so all players were ranked between that 150 to 20, and you had to pick within 1,000 points. So the whole idea was to try and create a situation where you had to try and pick, the smaller players as well. You could not just pick the Gilchrist and the Sachins. So I mean, you basically won on whether you picked Ryan Sidebottom or Matthew Hoggard, as Boycott discovered to his cost one day because he went to the Yorkshire, and Hoggard went and ran through the opposition. So that was the first challenge. The second part of it was how do you make it a television show? And so that really, because if you turn around and said, okay, people are going to play in a month, it's not a live show, because in those days in India you couldn't do it live. So you're recording, 2 days after the event. So how do you actually make it work? And the big challenge for us was, so I actually devised a format where after a certain number of players were done, we exposed the first 5, 6, 7 players who are in our team. Every player we sort of chose separated some guys out. So you say that, okay, this guy came in, these 5 guys chose this guy, and therefore this happened. The others chose that guy. And therefore we created a format that actually led up to the final one, which created a certain amount of excitement. And then, of course, we had Nasir presented. Fun fact, in fact, I was talking about it to Siddharth Basu recently. The first guy we approached was Amir Khan to do the show.
Oh, wow.
And he was actually, he had just done Lagan. Okay, while we are at it, the guy who gave the name for the show is also a certain Piyush Pandey. In those days, O&M used to do it. So he came down, and actually the only other name, because we came up with Dream, Fantasy, all that. First, Dream Fantasy didn't work in India, and he was very clear about it, and he was absolutely right. So I think the two names that finally were the chosen names were Sabse Bada Selector and Super Selector. And I think finally Super Selector was a combination of both being Indian, yet, having that international touch. And that's how it came about. So, yeah, it was a huge journey. Then, of course, Nasir came on board. He loved, he's an absolute cricket nut. He's done many things after me, including mid-wicket tails. And so, yeah, it was a fun show to do. At least to conceptualize and do it was a really fun show.
Nice. I think the celebrity element of it it carried the show, right, quite a bit, because you can't open it up to fans if you don't know what Chappelli and Boycott and Harsha Bogle are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had Sidhu's team, and somebody turned around and said yesterday that, they were talking to me and they said that, yeah, of course, we remember Juggernaut. I said, what the hell is Juggernaut? The last thing I remember it is a quiz question from Jagannath temple and all that. And it turned out that Juggernaut was the name of Sidhu's team. And I said, that is a blast from the past. Even I had forgotten that Sidhu's team
I
had a
think,
name.
if I'm not wrong, Harsha's team was called Chinsak 11. after
It was called
Chinmay.
Chins at 11.
Yes.
Good Lord.
Full nostalgia merchants on this podcast.
See what you've
Absolute
created.
nostalgia merchants. And yeah, you're making me feel every one of those white hairs of mine. But yeah, great memories. Absolutely great memories. And it was a really, really, as I said, the guy who started producing it on a regular basis. I used to appear as the sort of stats guy on the show. Was a friend of mine called Jim Ribbons, who was absolutely mad, who came from the UK, and he also brought a special element to the show. I mean, he used to make stuff happen which was fun. So I mean, it was far ahead of its time. In those days, if you could monetize, the internet, which in those days it was very difficult to, get people to put money and
Exactly.
play on the internet. Had they had the patience, they would have made a lot of money out of it. As it turned out, it was a harbinger for people like Dream 11 and all to do really well. And I mean, to give them credit, Harsh has often said that, Super Selector he used to play Super Selector, and when Super Selector wasn't there, he said there's an opportunity here. And man, he made a huge success? He and Bhavik have made a huge success of it.
So let's actually cut right to now, right? I believe your, I don't know what is the title. It's Director General of
Yeah,
Fantasy.
yeah. Director General of the Federation of Indian Fantasy. So is Director General. I'm very important. Extremely
Yeah.
important. Very, very important. Please do not underestimate this thing. Just because I'm appearing on this podcast, don't think I'm easy
Correct.
to get. I am very hard to get and very, 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 very important. Please.
I think we should start
Yeah.
calling you Mr. Bhattacharya from here
Yeah.
on for the rest
No,
of this
no, not
episode.
Mr. Bhattacharya will not
Director
work.
General, Mr. Director
His
General.
Royal Highness is good. Milord is good. Milord, especially if you say it in a good, that like good Hindi film, Milord.
Milord.
That sounds
Milord.
that has a certain ring to it. But
But
no,
can you tell
Mr.
us a little bit
Bhattacharya will
about
not.
this Director Generalship of
So
this
no,
entity?
so the Federation of Indian Fantasy Sports. So in India, fantasy sports. Uh, I mean, I happen to think, say for example, when we started Super Selected, it's a game of skill, and in fact,
Yeah.
a lot of what I did with IPI, with KKR, with the auction and all, was a lot of stuff that we sort of churned numbers and did, which started with Super Selected churning numbers, and that's how the
Wow.
journey was. So my point only is that. I think it's a game of skill. And I think today's day and age, what's happening is there's this whole thing of real money gaming and what it is. And
Yeah.
we represent only, FIFS represents only fantasy sport, not the any of the other sports, which is, the rummies and the pokers and the ludos and everything else is not. And what I want to, what I'm there to say is there is serious skill in the game, and what we do is to make sure that skill is always in the game. We make sure that it has to be played on certain formats. That means you must have at least a minimum of 20 overs for this thing. You cannot play on a single innings. So the bring chance down and bring skill up is the thing that we do, and I play a large part in that, because I believe that there is a huge opportunity. It is a great, forget the money that's played on it. It's a great conversational place. It allows people to really involve themselves in the game, and it's something that I'm genuinely passionate about. So yeah,
Oh,
I'm enjoying myself doing stuff on that.
I think like for a while we stopped. At least I had stopped following the IPL after it got like just too much. But the way it brought it back was to play fantasy with friends,
Yeah,
right, and have
exactly,
your own
with
leagues
friends.
and
And
stuff like
that's the
that.
whole thing. It's conversational leaders. Somebody gets out, you always have skin in the game. See, the
Yeah.
great part about fantasy is you always have skin in the game when a game is on.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm gonna push you a little hard on this to say fantasy. I'm guessing right now the formats are skewed towards daily games, right? One-off games. Are you
Yeah.
still saying in a one-off game, a fantasy is a game of skill? Because I
And you see,
imagined,
I believe, no, so I believe that fantasy is, what I genuinely believe is that if you're playing, say, 30, 40 games in
right,
a period of time, I think luck will even itself out, and you will
correct.
just think. If you say a single game, is it a game of skill? You can make better choices, but they may or may not work. But if you're going to play a fantasy game, and my question to you, my counter question to you is, in which way is it different from the stock market?
No, I don't have a problem. I'm all for
No,
free
exactly.
choice, but
Yeah.
I'm just
So
yeah,
that's what I'm saying. So it's a bit like fantasy for a single day is a bit like day trading. You know what I
correct.
mean? So
Yeah.
you'll say that, okay, I get it today, I don't. But over 30 games, 25, 30 games over an IPL season, if you play consistently, the most skilled person is far more likely to win more games than the less skilled person. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Joy, right until the IPL, right? You were involved in production and television, and then suddenly you're going from one part of the screen to the other, where you're now part of the system. You're actually running a team. So how did that switch actually happen? I mean, how did that transition happen?
So at that point, I was in National Geographic, and I had actually left ESPN Star. I was in National Geographic and History Channel as the senior vice president of programming. It's sounds the funnest job in the world. It isn't as much fun because whatever it was, National Geographic and History Channel, I was used to making programs in ESPN Star Sports,
Yeah.
whereas in National Geographic you make only about 1 or 2% of your production. The rest of it comes from
It's all
abroad.
done
It's more of
abroad.
how you align them, how you align them and all that. I mean, and it was not that fun after you do something like ESPN Star Sports, where Ray, my boss, and me were constantly thinking of new things to do, and we basically spent a lot of other people's money doing things we fantasized about. We made money on them. The productions were always successful, but yeah.
The only common thing between those two things were you were creating history in both cases, right? One was
That
that
is a really bad one. For that, if I was on your show, I would. If I were the rest of you, I'd charge him money for every bad.
No, no,
This is
no.
Joy, we'll
Tony
all
owes
be
us
millionaires.
millions.
Will
Tony
we?
owes us
Yeah.
millions. Yeah.
I'm not at all surprised. If it's every 47 episodes, I'm not at all surprised.
Will be Pat Cummins' auction price, Joy. We'll see that.
So when I basically at that point in time, I figured out that the IPL auction was like coming back to what we were talking about. It's like a bit like Super Selector, but instead of everyone being able to pick a guy, only you pick a guy, others can't. So I actually went and met two profs from ISI, and we designed a system for making sure that your picks are. As I said, like a proper LPP, you are getting the maximum value for your picks within the given budget. And I spoke to two or three teams. Three teams were interested. I leave the other two aside, but because I don't want to talk about what I didn't do. But a friend of mine, Jeet Banerjee, said that Shahrukh has wants to do a team, and look, this looks like an opportunity. You're also originally from Kolkata. What do you think? And we went and met Shahrukh, and that's how it turned out. And see, remember, early days of IPL, who is who? Nobody knows anyone. So you come in, you're part of a system, you've done something, okay, you stay on. We literally, Jeet, myself, in those days, we literally carved out our roles for ourselves, if you know what I mean, because nobody knew how professional teams ran. And it worked for us also because there are people, every team in the IPL comes from a different background. So, for example, a GMR in those days would come from a corporate background. So they'd say, okay, let's hire people who are going to sit together and all that. Shahrukh comes from what background? Shahrukh comes from a film production background. So Shahrukh's way of looking at it is, okay, let's hire a team who's going to deliver like a film. Okay, these are 3 months, this is a project to deliver it. And so you have a team of 5, 10 people, which becomes 40, 50, 100 people when an IPL is on. It delivers the IPL, they work on it. Then it shrinks back to 4, 5 people who just continue through the year, which is how a film operates. A film production unit operates that way. You balloon when the event is on, then you get to see. Film, theater, all these plays, all these operate in the same way. So that worked perfectly. Shahrukh understood that, and that's how we started operating. And yeah, it worked.
Just going through the lineup that you were up against in your first IPL game. Okay, you.
Those guys didn't go to the ISI. And
No, they did not. That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying it is a clash of civilizations almost. So you had your Kolkata Knight Riders going up against Wasim Jafar, Rahul Dravid, Mark Boucher, Jack Callis,
Kumble.
Anil Kumble.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, we also in those days, if Kolkata, everyone says Kolkata had a bad first 3 years. The first year, actually, this one injured himself. Chris Gale was there for the whole season. He injured himself one day before coming. We won 6 matches and lost 7. That could easily, Gale being there could have easily changed everything. And I'm not unhappy that it happened that way, because I'm glad that we, screwed up before we started doing well. But yeah, That's the one thing. And you ask any IPL coach, and what wins IPL, and people will say, yeah, good teams and players and teamwork and all that. The single largest factor is luck and good health. Good health is a disproportionately high factor, especially in tournaments like this.
But take us a little bit through that journey, right? One, selling a statistical model to a team and an owner, and then having sort of not really, stellar results starting out. So, where do you feel the pressure, and how do you continue to say that
So the
this
pressure
has
was so
merit to
not
its
so much in
fantasy?
year one, because year one everyone said, okay, fine, Gale was not there. Year two was when we really struggled because we didn't have a team. We were hugely dependent on our two foreign players, Gale and McCullum. There was a lot of talk of captaincy. Shore was not there. McCullum was made. McCullum was not getting too much because John was taking all the decisions. It was a divided team. And it was the toughest time of our life because I remember, there's this hotel called the Santon Sun, which is there in Joburg, where all the teams stay. And because Joburg was a venue, as was Pretoria, and you stayed, whether you played in Pretoria or Joburg, you stayed in the same Santon Sun. So at any time, 4 5 teams used to be there. And I remember game after game, we lost game after game. So the first couple of days they'd review, oh, you've lost your game and all that. After 3 4 games, there was like, they would be quiet because they also didn't want to say anything because, it was really, they also felt bad how much we lost. When we
There was
lost our
also
seventh and eighth games, it was literally, there was pity on their faces. You didn't look at them not because they were laughing at you, but because there was pity in their eyes. So it was among the toughest things because you're away from home, it's on the street, your team is all over the place, and yeah, it was tough times. I mean, the next season we did much better. We were 7-7, but Dhoni did magic in Dharamshala. They qualified. We should have got a higher run rate. In fact, 4 teams ended up on 7-7, and Delhi and us were the 2 teams that didn't make it.
in between in that 2009 season, there was also what did fake IPL player write today,
Yeah.
right? There was
But yeah, here's one thing I want to talk about because fake IPL player I have spoken about in those days in South Africa. I made friends of mine who are journalists. And I said, dude, listen to me. Okay. And these are friends. I'm not even talking about guys I don't know. I said, dude, this guy's talking about roommates. Okay. Roommates were never there in the IPL. They went out from the Indian team in 2006. This guy talks about playing water polo in Cape Town. In Cape Town, by that time, it's so bloody cold. I mean, if you tried to play water polo, I know what would shrink, and it's not the ball. It's not the this thing volleyball that would shrink or the polo thing. And and then I said that you look at this guy saying, okay, this day we had a meeting. Go to the hotel and ask, on that day in this place, was there a meeting? And the truth is, it would be take that much time. I told them, I said, forget about him being a part of our team. He's not on this continent. I can tell you this thing. Because at least he'd know how cold it was. Yeah.
So
So the point of it was, yeah, and I understand why they went along with what was happening because they were having too much fun. Is it this guy? Is it that? Is that? So after a while, it became a joke. But the truth of it was, if any of them had wanted to just find out who it was, that to eliminate who it was, it would have taken them 5.
Fact
that's the
checking from
insider
back in the day.
perspective.
no, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
And I'll tell you one more. I'll tell you one more thing. The same guy, and I met him later. I've not met him, but I've spoken to him and all that. He's some Mukherjee. His name is Amitabh Mukherjee. Or he was
Abhishek,
Bangalore
no,
based.
that's the that's the historian.
Abhishek is my co-writer. Don't do this to him. But this guy was an advertising guy who was a fun. I mean, he wrote a novel also after that. But the point was, he next became inside the Pakistan team for the 2009 World Cup. Okay, and he did a similar series of inside the Pakistan team, and it didn't work. Do you know why? Because Pakistan won the tournament. Series like this are only fun if you keep
When a team,
losing,
yeah,
because
right.
it's not fun if they're winning. So that's the thing that it's so interesting of what happens. And fake IPL player was a rage at the time. It was a sociological phenomena, but it's fascinating how that story turned out.
but also, if you're following Pakistan cricket, you don't need like a insider. You have Rashid Latif giving you all the good stuff.
Yeah. I've had the best stories I've ever had was many years ago. I did a show called Stumped, which was actually started with a series where Indian cricketers versus Pakistan cricketers. There was a quiz show,
Yeah.
and it's a tragedy that all those tapes, ESPN, Star Sports, when it broke up, all those tapes, Harsha Online, Super Selector, Stumped, all have been wiped out.
Oh
It's
my God.
unbelievable. It's unbelievable. When that entire history, and I cannot believe that they did it. And none of us were in ESPN Star at that time. All were wiped out. And there's this show where all these Pakistan cricketers. So there was Asif Iqbal, Zahir Abbas, Sikandar Bakht, and one more player. I can't remember. Ramiz Raja versus Gavaskar and all these guys,
Wow.
and Mohinder Ramanathan Gavaskar. And it
Were
was
there
a
other
quiz
teams
show.
too, Joy? There were more
Later
teams,
there was
maybe
an
Australia.
Australian team.
Yeah.
There was an Australian team, India versus Australia, where the team was Border, Gilchrist, Ponting,
Yeah.
and Tom Moody. And there was a team which was Indian batters versus Indian bowlers, where the Indian bowlers were led by Venkat Raghavan, who was really sharp. And Gavaskar versus Venkat Raghavan, that was actually the best competition because he was really, really good.
But tell us some of the fun Pakistan stories.
No, no, it's the fun Pakistan stories. The only story I can tell you is a former Pakistan manager told me this, that after the 92 World Cup, they'd won, and after 92 World Cup, the Pakistan players were untouchable. So they were in a hotel, and this hotel was in Pakistan, and there was a lot of worry that players might be imbibing substances that made them happy. Okay, not the liquid type, but the drier variety. So this guy goes and tries to tell all these players that please stop it. And after a while, he realizes that every room literally had somebody or the other enjoying themselves. So he was desperate because the press was around. So can you imagine? He couldn't tell anything to any of the players because they won the 92 World Cup. They told him, go take a walk. We are not going to take this thing. So this guy goes and finds somebody in Pakistan, I think this is Karachi or somewhere, find somewhere where they can buy incense sticks, dhoopkati as we call it, and he like lights a whole amount of dhoop and he runs up and down the corridor trying to make sure that the scent changes. So like I said, whatever Indian managers have had to do, they've never had to do that. So it was crazy. It's quite wild.
It's a really good segue to the modern day Pakistan side of it. And you had a couple of years with Shoaib Akhtar at KKR, right? This is the first
I
year.
had
How was
1
that
year.
like? Just 1 year.
Yeah, Shoaib was
Yeah.
mad. Shoaib was crazy. He was barking mad. He's a fun guy. He's crazy, and he was like the only advantage I had with him was that he was like, I mean, he was very straight. I mean, he would ask for stuff which was like crazy. He'd suddenly turn around and said, "I need a exercise bike in the middle of the dressing room because I want to warm up out here." And when he came from Pakistan, there were so many rumors around him that it was really crazy. He was at that time with a gentleman called Salman, who was his agent at the time. And they came, and I think they came on a flight from Bombay, and they came to Kolkata, and they came to the hotel. And then some guy from PT or UNI calls me up and says that, we've heard that Shoaib Akhtar has come, and he was come from Delhi to Kolkata, and he was carrying 30 syringes. And why? He was asked why he was carrying 30 syringes. He said he was diabetic, and obviously nobody believed it. So I go and ask this chap, I go and ask this guy Salman. I said, "What's the story?" He says, "Rubbish. I'm Shoaib Akhtar didn't even have hand luggage. Whatever hand luggage was with me." So I said, "This is a fantastic opportunity." So I call up. Actually, in those days, I could do whatever I wanted to. Early days of IPL, I called a press conference and I called all these guys and I said, "Look, I just want to make a statement. This is the report that's come. Shoaib Akhtar has come from Bombay with 30 syringes he's got. He said he's diabetic, therefore he's carrying these syringes. I'd like to say that this report is absolutely correct, except for the fact that he didn't come from Bombay. He came from Delhi. He didn't have any hand luggage, so he didn't have any syringes. He was not asked for this thing, and of course, he is diabetic as he's claimed he is, and that's the end of the story. So, anytime you want to carry this story or any other stories, please feel free to. But the next time somebody is going to report something like this, we will take them to court." Which meant that I had a free pass of 1 month after that, because anyone would ask anything about Shoaib Akhtar. I said, yeah, why don't you go and publish it? I'm happy. And just go ahead and no. Joyda, if you're saying this is it, I said, no. Fine, go, please be my guest. So fun days, yeah. Really fun days.
But T20 is a format where you don't necessarily remember too much, right? I mean, there are so many games and the game is so fast paced. But 16 years later, we remember that spell against Delhi that he bowled at the Eden Gardens. It's just mind blowing when we look at the scorecard even today.
No, no, absolutely. He was just, I mean, he was on fire. And these are top bats. I mean, and Delhi in those days, people tend to underestimate what the
because they
Delhi
didn't win.
team was in
Yeah,
2008, and then 2009, Dirk Dennis joined them. It was even this thing. You look at that team here. Sehwag, Gambhir, AB de Villiers, it was like a batting machine, They had everyone. They had, Dinesh Karthik, Sehwag, de Villiers, and he just ran through that order. He just ran through that order, 4 wickets for 13. He just finished it off. I remember Shahrukh dancing and running out. In those days, of course, dressing rooms and all that were not as sacrosanct as they later became with, everything that happened. And it was something. I mean, to watch a Pakistani bowler being cheered at the Eden Gardens to do what he did against Delhi was something. And I think it's great for cricket. It's great for cricket that you can cheer whoever it is playing well. Doesn't matter which nationality.
Is IPL won at the auction table or on the field?
Auction table plays a large part, but again, I go back. Luck plays a huge part. And my other big thing is that IPL doesn't need coaches. You don't have coaches in the IPL. You should call them managers. What are you going to teach them in a month and a half? You're going to teach AB de Villiers to bat, or you're going to teach McGrath or Shoaib Akhtar to bowl. You don't. You need guys who will come in, turn around, see the players, see what they can deliver, manage their egos, manage their expectations, manage their health, and say, what can you give me for the next 1.5 months? That's what you do. And
Joy,
that's not
that's
about technique.
it's something we were discussing again, and the topic of analysts came up, right? And KKR, I believe, were one of the earlier ones to have a more consistent approach to analysts and scouts, combining. Is it Shrikant, the analyst who's been
Yeah,
there for a long
Shrikant,
time?
yeah.
Yeah,
Nah,
I
I
think,
think he's just left, but yeah, he was there for 15 good years.
and he was there for all the Knight Riders teams. There was a consistent approach to it.
Yeah, from 2009 onwards, he was there for everybody.
And how do you see that? Because some players tend to take it well versus many who don't believe in that concept. Do you see them as a necessity, auction table,
No,
and
no, they're an absolute necessity. But here's what I want to say. What good analysts are, and good analysts will always be, are decision support systems. Okay? They give you a certain amount of data on which you take informed choices. You make informed choices. But the ability to make that informed choice gets much better. And you cannot, an analyst just cannot pick a team. There are some basic things that change, and which an analyst cannot bear into consideration. I mean, you can pick a guy on his record, and then suddenly if Gautam Gambhir says we're going to play 7 matches the Eden Gardens where the wicket is low and slow, that kind of guy may not work out there. So an analyst can take you so far, okay, but a good captain or a good coach, informed by good analysis, saying that okay, this is the data I have. And the other thing is, again, nowadays with AI you talk a lot about prompt engineering, and I think exactly, good, it also boils down to the coach, captain, asking the right questions of the analyst, saying okay, what, not just okay, what's his, how much is the average, but okay, what does he do in pitches like this? So what works for him here? How is he against left-handers? So all these are the kind of things. So an analyst also will give you the kind of quality that you, the quality of the questions you ask him, and the quality of this thing he can respond to.
And again, the other part to this is obviously you mentioned while talking about Nat Geo and History Channel,
Yeah.
etc., that you carved out that role at the IPL for yourself or at KKR for yourself, and you've made the journey from being on the production side to being like the face of, let's say, one of the faces of Crickbuzz Live, and you've done a lot of these shows as an analyst as part of that group. uh, how do you see the change in the ecosystem? Let's say, like, is there respect or is there enough value shown to the non-cricketer expert on TV and digital today, or is that still the same overall?
Look, I think I was lucky because I was with Harsha for a long time, and Harsha, thought that I could contribute in Crickbuzz, and it worked out. I mean, it worked out also because we are strange commodities. I mean, it's not easy to sort of buttonhole us into A or B or C.
Yeah.
And see, the only only honest advantage that a non-cricketer has over a cricketer. There's only one advantage because the rest of the advantages all lie with the cricketer. The only advantages that they have is that you're a bit like Amol Palekar. You're the guy next door. So what happens is every guy thinks, yeah, I have a chance of becoming a Harsha Bhogle or a Joy Bhattacharya. They are under no illusions that they can become a Zahir Khan or a Virendra
Yeah.
Sehwag because it's impossible. Therefore, you become more reachable, and therefore, in some ways, that is an attractive proposition. And I think Harsha has done that so beautifully in commentary and everything, being the person next door, being that person sitting out there who's giving you a perspective which resonates closest to you. And all the rest of us have done is just sort of follow in his path. And as I said, it doesn't hurt to sort of read a wide variety of things and bring into a cricket broadcast things that are not just cricket. I think that is the one thing that we've done well at Crickbuzz, that brought lots of other things, brought management into it, brought fun into it, brought uh, which I'm terribly proud of, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy into it. So we have done stuff like that which you wouldn't do otherwise, or most cricketers wouldn't do otherwise. So that was the fun part of it.
See, you say all this, but the shows that you and Harsha made no longer exist in the archive, and this podcast has at least 3 backups on cloud. So, 100 years later, when the generations come back and look at what cricket content looked like, bits and pieces
No,
exist.
but yeah, I think Crickbuzz does a better job of backing up than I think ESPN Star did for sure. And if they don't, then I'm going to take serious issue with them. Good point. I need to take it up because this time I'm not going to allow that to happen to me.
Imagine the only record of Joy Bhattacharya existing 100 years from now is on bits and pieces this episode because
And
we backed up and others didn't. but on that point, right, like there is a glut of cricket content and everyone loves producing, including us, because it's easy enough to do given technological advances and apparently an audience also. We never thought we'd be on YouTube, but that's where we found a larger following than even podcasts. All of this also means that there is a lot of noise right now around cricket, right? So obviously stats are one thing, matches, etc. But how does a cricketer slash a management team make an informed decision to say what are the factors that actually matter and what don't?
I think what happens is that every one of you has to look at something with saying that, okay, what is the core of your show? What are you about? Why are people watching you? So it's a very funny thing. When Harsha first spoke to me about Crickbuzz, he said, look, think of it as three friends chatting about cricket and having informed decisions, thoughts about it and chatting. But there are three people who are friendly with each other chatting. This is not a news show where people will shout each other down or try and bring each other down or try and make the other person look small or ignorant. And that was a core thought from where Harsha's thought. And remember, I come from a production background. So I said, does that work? I mean, does it work? Wow, I mean, what is he saying? I mean, I was extremely skeptical, and he was absolutely right because he caught that pulse much before anybody else. That what people don't want is a news show where people are trying to, upstage the other, show somebody how little you know. They want friends or people who they are familiar with in a familiar way to talk about cricket, to talk about things that they are resonate with them, and that's something amazingly enough that wasn't there. And Crickbuzz provided that opportunity, and I think that's how it worked.
So, one question on the IPL. What we've noticed and read about is, the tremendous transformation that the IPL has brought about, in the sense that it's democratized the sport. It's democratized the scouting process. So people who were earlier not getting noticed have been picked up by talent scouts and so on, and that's hugely satisfying to know that you are a part of that, right? But on the flip side, you're it's also the most it's the most potent weapon in the BCCI arsenal, in a sense, because it enriches the BCCI so much. It gives the BCCI a very big stick, and that stick is not always wielded with kindness, right? So do you ever feel conflicted about this thing that you are such an integral part of?
Look, again, if I was not there, you think the BCCI would act differently or wouldn't? So the point of it is within whatever ability you have to talk about the game and talk about what is there, you do your best to put forward an opinion which you think is honest, unbiased, uh, not overtly national, but something which is more. It's a love for a sport, and the sport love for a sport does not stop at national boundaries, as love for players never stops at national boundaries. And try and say that you cricket is, as most sports should be, a universal language. So within whatever restrictions you have, you do your bit and you pick the battles that you can fight. I mean, so I completely follow that trail. I fight the battles. I try and do the things. I try and influence the things I think I can influence. What I can't, I don't take on things that are. There's no point on me going and flaming myself out on something that I know I can't win, and I'm very straight about.
Some scouting stories that you can share with us.
So look, scouting, there were lots. I remember when Srikanth came and we first spoke in 2011 about Ryan Tendushkate, and saying that look at it from the saying that was the first player who was actually picked up from outside the sort of proper cricket ecosystem as we look at it, the Test cricket ecosystem. And Tendo was fantastic for us, and Tendo has been because even his performances on the field, you say that they're decent, but Tendo is much more than that in a dressing room. He gives you much more and so many other things. So there have been things like that happened. We looked at Surya Kumar Yadav in 2014, and we looked at him and we did some analysis, and we saw that his cloud of the way he scored, then there's a cloud of scoring of how you score fours, sixes, ones, was very similar to that of Sehwag, another very, very explosive player. And we said, this looks interesting out here. And that's how we picked Surya Kumar Yadav in 2014. And, he did very well for us in a particular position. It's only that, and Gautam has gone later and said that he couldn't provide Surya that position where he needed to bat, especially if he had to open. When they started opening with Narayan, so Surya never had that spot at 4 or 3 which he needed to have to really contribute to the team. So I think those are the kind of things that really give you pleasure. You pick 1 or 2 players like that, and they really make a difference for you.
You didn't take the subtle bait, so let me ask you explicitly. How could you let Sanju Samson go?
So I signed Sanju Samson in 2009, not even 2011, 2009. When IPL contracts were not there, he was on a yearly contract with KKR because this very good friend of mine called Biju George signed him up. And Biju at that point in time said that, this is the guy. And the truth of it is that in 2012, the only reason we let Sanju Samson go was because we could not give him a first team chance. There was no chance. There were too many people. There was Bisla after that. Robin came. So there was never a chance of getting it. And he was too good a player to just sit out there. And therefore, 2011, he was a part of the squad. 2012, he was a part of the squad. But he just had zero chance of playing because you had Brendan McCullum in your squad, you had Manvinder Bisla in your squad. So one of the things is you actually have to make choices like that, saying that sometimes people let people go not because they don't necessarily think it's talented, but the guy is just going to sit on the bench when this guy can practically go and do things other places. And so we always knew. In fact, I was there in 2010. One of the things most people don't know is we went on a tour. KKR went on a tour of Sri Lanka, and we played a lot of matches. And among the people playing for us was Mandeep Singh, Sanju Samson. One of the people also playing was a 7 foot 1 inch Pakistani bowler,
Irfan.
Irfan. Mohammad Irfan played, and Sanju kept to him and batted against him in the nets. And literally, Sanju in 2010 is what? He's about 15 and a half. And at 15 and a half, facing a 7 foot 1 inch bowler who bowls at 145 in the nets was quite something.
Wow.
So right then we knew that this guy is the goods. He's the actual goods. There's no question.
Tony got more than you asked for, man. Tony.
Yeah, no, I love how Joy is also a master at diplomacy. He's framed it as if you love someone, let them go.
Let them go,
Which is why.
As I said, diplomacy, available resources, call it what you like. But yeah, Sanju Samson being talented was not exactly a secret.
Yeah. No. Shoaib Akhtar may not have had needles in his bag, but we have plenty of needle on this podcast. So just please,
Not at
please
all.
excuse.
To go from 2008 and you finally won in 2012. So that was, that's a fairly long time to kind of stick with the process, to keep the faith. Um, how difficult were those 4 years, and
I think,
how?
look, in year three, in year two was the worst. Year three we were 7-7, and then year four, before year four, we went to the auction, and we got a pretty decent team. I mean, we went after Gotham. We had Gotham. We got Callis. We got Yusuf Patan. We got the pieces of what we thought was a very strong team. We were 8-5 going in to play Bombay in Kolkata, and there was one final over left where Balaji was bowling, and they needed 21. Okay, had we won that match, we are 9-5, and we go into first or second place. And if we lose this match, we play third, fourth place with Mumbai. And it was just one of those things. Balaji bowled the first three balls were snicks. All three went to the boundary, and it just happens. Top edge boundary, inside edge French cut boundary, edge boundary, and then Bala just lost his this thing, and the next two balls just smashed for sixes, and we lost that game. Had we won that game, okay, so we were in third, fourth place in 2011 itself, and we thought we had a very good chance of winning. And then, so we already knew that journey was there. Then 2012, we add Sunil Naran. So by 11-12, we are already looking forward. And actually, the 2010 squad, had we just played it a bit smarter in terms of run rate, we had a crack squad. We had a really, really good squad, especially the international players we had. I mean, the quality. You had McCullum, you had Gale, you had David Hussey, you had Angelo Matthews, you had Ajanta Mendes, you had Shane Bond. Okay, you had Brad Hodge, you had Charles Langeveld. It's probably the greatest collection of international, talent out there. We just could play only four, and it just didn't work out for us.
Joy, I think all of this is sporting logic that the professional and the sports person understands, right? You can't always say that about owners in the IPL. It's not so common for them to be patient for a 4 year or a 5 year period. And I know that KKR with, obviously Shahrukh owns it, etc. But you have a really solid team that's got the patience to stick with this kind of, to use the cliche, stick with the process and hire the right people, go through an auction cycle. Was that the feeling on the inside as well, that there was enough patience and trust
Yeah,
with
there
the
was,
system?
and there was trust, there was patience, and at the end of the day, we knew that if we had a second auction, a big auction, we'd sort out what we did. So in 2011, we knew what we did. 2014 was even more interesting because we went to the auction and everyone thought we had a shit team. We were very clear we had a good team. Okay, any team which had that composition that we had, but the players didn't look glamorous enough for people to look. Surya Kumar Yadav and Manish Pandey and Morne Morkel just didn't seem glamorous enough. But we knew we had a really, really set team that if we got it right, we'd win, and we did. The truth is that that's what happens. I mean, we were pretty solid, and till remember one thing, there was, I mean, Jeet Banerjee is he was part of the auction process throughout till 2015. By that which time I had also left for the FIFA Under 17 World Cup, and Jeet comes from an art auction background, so he always knew when to how to play the auction game, and there are tactics that people actually learned later, but the first 3-4 years Jeet was very good at it, and possibly very smart at the way he built it. He tactically played with how, when do you just put up your hand, how do you push people, how do you sort of look relaxed, suddenly come in. There's a lot of psychology that goes into playing the auction game, and I think Jeet was marvelous at
Just
that.
another question: as someone who's produced so much of sport on television, do you feel like the sport is maybe either overproduced, or maybe it's become a little formulaic in the way a match is covered and the way it's put
I
together?
I can't I can't agree with you more. My single largest thing about cricket is, and I argue this. I mean, okay, ICC will always remain, and ICC, the guy who runs it, is a very close friend of mine from ESPN Star, Ajesh Ramachandran. But by and large, my single biggest thing is that cricket broadcast has not changed in essentially in the last 15, 20, 30 years. And you've added a couple of graphics and all, but I feel in its essence it hasn't changed, and I feel it can be refreshed, it can be changed. uh, I feel nobody has given it, everyone has gone wrong with the norm. So our idea of change is to say, okay, instead of having two commentators, let channel 9 have three commentators. Wow, I mean, this is like a bit like Gillette blades. Okay, add another blade and Sorry, we are not doing enough as producers. We are not doing enough as innovators. We are not doing enough. Other sports are far ahead, and I genuinely feel that. It's just that cricket anywhere sells, so it doesn't matter.
No, but there should be some math around this, right? I mean, especially with the IPL, I think the regional, broadcast did pretty well. At least the Tamil feed, and probably in
Yeah,
football,
so
the
all those
Malayalam
feeds
feed,
are
all
doing
that.
well, but that's basically the difference is only the commentary. It's not
Yeah,
changed in the essence of how it's presented. And
right.
I feel you can present. There are opportunities to present it differently, which I'm not saying that they necessarily become the norm, but we haven't even experimented. We haven't even tried to do it.
So,
That's the
so,
truth.
so, can you give us a sense of what some of these experiments could be, or some of these out of the box ideas could be?
I don't know. As I said, you could start commentary from a different place. You could look at some of the angles that we look at. See, we do a particular way of we cut. We cut with the ball follow going in, then the static camera goes in, then we go to the wide shot so that we see where the ball is going, and then it's a series of replays. Red, blue, green, yellow, all these these things are lined up, and one after the other you play replay. So cricket you see is 15 seconds, 12 to 15 seconds of hot action, as we call it. Guy running in, bowling, shot being hit, catch being taken, or ball run going to the boundary, or ball being fielded, and that's ball thrown back, end of action. And 45 to 50 seconds after that of ball being recovered, bowler going back, somebody chatting. So the ratio of hot action to cold action, as I say, is very different. Go to football, you can barely get a replay in because the action is continuous. Cricket is a game of replays. And moment you have a game of replays, your opportunity to do different things increases dramatically. And I just think there are things we can do if we put our minds to it, which we have.
Just before we let you go, obviously teased it at the beginning. You've done a bunch of stuff, and as a bunch of guys who are pushing our 30s, getting into our 40s, the real question is, how has Joy done what he's done? Right, like you've obviously enjoyed most of what you've done, but also there's wide variety, right, including volleyball and under 17 World Cup. And can you give us a sense of what the progression has been in your mind, and how do you decide on what's the next thing for you to do?
I basically think about life look at really serious decisions in a 6 month time frame because I don't think anything more than that really works. To be honest with you, my first job in cricket with IMG TWI came because somebody upstairs was doing a quiz show and the cricket quiz show, and I thought they had hired a statistician to set the questions. And I thought the statistician will set not the right questions to have fun on a quiz show.
Yeah.
So went upstairs, gave my spiel for 5 minutes, and walked off. And after a while, they called me back, and I set questions for them. And then they wanted me to take money for setting questions, and I didn't take money because I said that if I don't take money from them to set questions, then they don't have control me, if you know what I mean. So what happens is, therefore, you're forced to offer me a job because that's the only way you can control what I do. So that's how I got my sneaky break into sport, and I have not allowed that to stop me in any way. I wish I could tell you that there's a process or a path to it. It's pure blind luck. A lot of is being in the right time in the right place. And I was there in the 90s when television, sport, all this was exploding. You know, I was there at the start of the IPL, the start of a lot of stuff. So being there at the right time in the right place, fortunately, unfortunately, worked a lot for me. But I'll tell you one more thing, and I think you guys are doing one thing right. One is that whatever you do, and I figured this one out, just be consistent. So if you're doing a podcast, be consistent. It does give you numbers, and you would have noticed. Sometimes you'd be wondering upfront and saying that, are we, who are we talking to? Nobody knows that we are doing this, but you do it, and people do. You start aggregating people, you start aggregating numbers. So the one thing is, figure out what you enjoy, do a lot of it, and you'll be amazed and surprised at how far you can get with that, because the guy without passion can never compete with you because you're having fun doing it. This guy's, it's a job for him or her. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You and Rajiv Shukla always at the right place at the right time. But
Yeah, though he has a better profile than mine. I like his look. His look is much more consistent than mine, I have to say.
no,
Shukla's look
no,
is.
he'll never be on bits and pieces. So
He'll never be on
100
bits and
years
pieces.
later, only you.
Yeah. Also, he always manages to ended up standing next to the winning team's owner, which I've not managed. Which I, unfortunately, being a part of KKR, I never managed to do.
Also, he is not the director general of anything. So
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I want to reiterate that I am very important. If you guys haven't understood it till now, I'm really sorry.
So just on that 6 month point that you made, right? Just to bring it alive, can you talk to us about some of the stuff that you've walked away from in a 6 month horizon, if you don't mind sharing?
So three things. One is that I have never, I've had job opportunities. I've always done stuff I enjoyed doing, and I've chosen that perhaps sometimes over money, simply because I'm too lazy to do well at things I don't like. And that's being honest, so I need stuff to interest me to be able to do it. And therefore there's a lot of corporate jobs and a lot of sort of channel kind of jobs which I've post National Geographic. I figured out that I'm not cut out to sit behind a desk and this thing, and I'm never good at clocking in at the right time and all that. My attitude to work is very simple. Even guys who work with me, I say, it's a cliche, but dude, never, never. When you sat for your exams in school, you never wrote the number of hours you study, okay? Because it's not doesn't count for anything. So, dude, if you have the work, I don't care whether you work 12 hours, 8 hours, finish in 2 hours. As long as you give me acceptable work, I don't care. Acceptable work within a period of time. So, I think some people are you. One of the parts of, I think, doing decently or doing well for yourself, or if not doing well for yourself, doing things that make you happy, is knowing what makes you happy or doesn't make you happy, and knowing what you can't do. So, for example, what I cannot do is is a good thing, and it's upfront. So there are requests that a lot of managers, team directors get from players, which nobody in KKR would dare ask. They'd know that I'm not going to do that kind of shit. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Yep.
So a large part of what, so I keep joking about this to my this thing. When I was in ESPN Star in production, and you're doing productions all over the place, so your transport company, the guy who's your this thing travel agency, he's billing 2.5 crores, at least. So I call him up and I said, अफजाल यार, इस साल तो दिवाली में I'm just मैंने गैरेज में जगह लग गया है गाड़ी के लिए, तू बता कौन सा मॉडल भेज रहा है. तो ही सेड, सर लास्ट टाइम हमने एसएमएस भेजा था आपको, इस साल एसएमएस नहीं जाएगा, इस साल मेल जाएगा, क्योंकि एसएमएस में भी थोड़ा पैसा लगता है, मेल फ्री में जाता है. ऐसे तेरे जैसे बंदे लोग को पाल करना, I have ruined my life. So, but dude, you're known for what exactly? So he also knew exactly what I was, and I think after a while people know. So a lot of stuff also has not come to me, which would have come to others people, because they know that I'm a particular type. It is what it is, and I'm glad for it.
Yeah. No, so obviously we've not been able to control you on this podcast because we haven't paid you for it. But what the viewers won't realize is that first Joy was sitting in a different angle and he saw that there was a switchboard behind him. And for the sake of you, dear viewers, he's switched to a place where there is no switchboard
You
behind
didn't
him.
have to switch to a place that was. Please, is there a weekly finding system, or do you do it on a yearly basis? I mean,
Man.
how do you get your
It's
money
made
off
in
him? Because you
drinks later.
seriously need to. Yeah.
It's a good thing I'm also the editor of this podcast. So you know what stuff won't make it. No, so Joy, one of the final thing before we let you go, as promised, was that this last week, right, we were having a raging debate on our group about is it time that cricketers now started prioritizing things more than money, right? Because in Indian cricket right now, there's a lot of money coming in. But also at the same time, I feel like personally that there is no mentorship for cricketers on how to deal with money or look at what is more important and how to prioritize, right? Do you see that as something that will evolve, or is everything okay as
See,
it is?
it's a funny thing because in 2009-10 in Kolkata, KKR had started that. Talking to cricketers about money, talking to cricketers about getting contracts, about insurance, about how much of the money you should spend, what you should do. I think it's gone way beyond that. Most of them now have people, managers. Some of them are doing a good job, some of them are doing a terrible job. It's all over the place. The truth is that I can't blame a player for prioritizing if a guy comes to me and says that, सर टेस्ट क्रिकेट में चांस मिलेगा नहीं मिलेगा पता नहीं, यहाँ सर मैं 8 हफ्ते में मैंने 4 करोड़ रुपया 5 करोड़ रुपया बना रहा हूँ. How do I tell him when he comes from a middle class background not to prioritize that and prioritize his family's future and this thing? So the truth is, it is easy for me to make these comments saying, yeah, to test cricket be khel, it's important for you to play red ball cricket. Why don't they play red ball cricket? A lot of guys don't play red ball cricket because they don't want to get injured and they don't feel they have the physical fitness. So a lot of guys, forget us, international cricketers are walking away from contracts because they want to play. So look, that any urge to make money and to make a living for themselves, especially given the very limited time that these guys are there, and a lot of them will not make coaches or commentators or experts of the game. I can't I can't fault them. It's restraint of trade. For me to say this form of cricket is better is like me trying to tell a runner that boss तू 100 meters क्यों दौड़ता है, तू मैराथन दौड़. अरे यार उससे यहाँ ज्यादा पैसे मिल रहा है कर रहा है, क्या मैं क्या how can I tell him? So the truth of it is, it's great for us to sit and pontificate about it. What the BCCI can do is, because they're sitting on a fair amount of money, is they can make it, they can incentivize people going for a test system. But I will still tell you that the guys who will go for a test system over a consistent period are either people who were born in an era where test cricket was big, or people who feel that the T20 will not give them as many opportunities as maybe test cricket might give them over a period of time. That's the truth. And for it to be any other way goes against the laws of economics. I mean, they will optimize for the best amount of money for the least amount of time. Everyone.
But is there a threshold beyond which, probably players need to look at it differently, or you're saying that it's going to be
No,
like
I think
shortcut?
no. The players do also. Players do reach a stage where they're saying, "Okay, now I'm not playing. हो गया पैसा बना दिया मैंने. So I am doing it now beyond. I'm looking at doing other things. I want to leave an impact. I want to live." So players do it, but see how many of those players reach that level, of a Virat Kohli or a Rohit Sharma, who's at that stage where they're saying, "Okay, we are." I mean, I'm telling you, a Virat or a Rohit is no longer doing it for the money. Okay, or even a Bumrah would be probably be secure. They are now reached that stage. But when you are still in that middle group where you don't know whether you will survive in the team, not survive in the team or not, then perhaps these things are not even coming into your mind. You're not looking at your impact on civilization, on cricket and the future of the game. You're not. You're saying, yeah, I survive, कितने साल खेल सकूंगा, कितना पैसा मिलेगा.
Joy, just one question. So you have obviously a lot of fans in our group, and one of them, Abhishek Chopra, requested me to ask you this question today. His question is: if you were made commissioner of a new league today, what would you do to kick the IPL's ass? How would you make something better than the IPL?
Very difficult question. Tell him that I'll answer that question after he gives me my first advance, because I'm sure as hell not going to give it.
That's
I'm
the
sure
best
as
way
hell
to-
not going to tell him for free on a podcast for which I'm not getting paid.
It's okay.
General of first
The
advance.
name, as I said, is B for Bhattacharya, not C for whatever you think it is. And the C is not for Chopra, by the way. In case I don't know.
The way to use this podcast is to claim prior use, because no one listens to it. So your idea will safely be locked away. And if someone comes up with your same idea, you can say this was recorded on, 10th November
Nice try,
2024.
Tony.
Refer to.
Nice try. Really nice try. I'll pass.
All right. Thank you so much. On that note,
Thanks.
what an episode of Bits and Pieces this has been. Thank you so much, Joy. And this
Cheers.
is Srinath, Prashant,
Lovely
Tony,
being
and Joy
here.
saying bye.
Thanks, Srinath.
It's been an absolute honor.
Thanks, Ronald.
Love it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
TV umpire to director, we have a player review. Can we rock and roll, please?